In democratic systems characterized by two-party dominance, fringe ideologies often seek mechanisms to amplify their influence without immediate majority support. These ideologies, whether rooted in cultural preservation or economic reform, navigate structural asymmetries such as low voter turnout in primaries and the Electoral College's pivotal role in national outcomes. By adopting tactics historically employed by minority groups, including bloc voting and coalition bargaining, fringe entities position themselves as kingmakers in fragmented political landscapes. This process transforms marginal views into leverage points, exploiting the system's reliance on focused mobilization over broad consensus. The evolution of such strategies draws from precedents where small factions reshaped party platforms through persistent entryism and resource concentration. For instance, ideological minorities infiltrate major parties by reframing their agendas as aligned with mainstream concerns, thereby gaining footholds in local elections before scaling to state and national levels. Emotional appeals and narrative reframing further facilitate acceptance, turning subjugated beliefs into resonant calls for justice or heritage. These methods ensure that even offensive or non-conforming ideas gain traction by emphasizing shared grievances and logical underpinnings supported by historical analogies. Ultimately, the consolidation of power requires both short-term tactical agility and long-term institutional embedding. Fringe groups maintain superiority by controlling educational narratives and economic incentives, blocking rival ideologies through legal reforms and cultural dominance. This cyclical dynamic of resurgence and maintenance underscores the adaptability of democratic politics, where minorities become majorities through strategic maneuvering, only to defend their gains against inevitable challenges. Formation of decentralized fringe political networks. Fringe political entities establish themselves by embracing decentralized architectures designed to minimize exposure to legal and public examination, all while emulating the proven frameworks of long-standing minority advocacy organizations. In this setup, participants function autonomously within the established major political parties, propelling their objectives forward through subtle, informal synchronization facilitated by secure communication methods. This configuration preserves their formal autonomy under the law, yet cultivates collective voting patterns that amplify their collective impact. The methodology permits the subtle repositioning of radical perspectives as defenses of cultural heritage or fiscal safeguards, akin to the rhetorical strategies utilized by various ethnic interest groups in articulating their priorities. These networks emphasize tactics that adhere to non-violent principles and center on policy advancement, directing efforts toward elections with minimal voter participation, where incremental adjustments can produce outsized effects. Integration into community-based subgroups, coupled with the application of analytical tools for precise voter engagement, enables the accumulation of authority absent a unified governing body. This structure accommodates variations in local regulations and population compositions, drawing from past examples like the dispersed branches of labor unions, which illustrate the advantages of segmentation in promoting adaptability and shielding against overarching accountability. As these entities mature, they broaden their scope by exchanging endorsements on peripheral matters for substantive policy yields, thereby enhancing their credibility via cross-partisan positioning. This progression echoes the development of faith-based subgroups inside political organizations, where discrete, semi-confidential dissemination upholds core objectives even as outward affiliations remain flexible. Through this lens, the fringe gradually integrates into the broader political fabric, evolving from peripheral actors to essential components that shape discourse and decisions. The enduring viability of such networks hinges on their capacity to evolve in response to shifting political terrains, ensuring that initial fragmented efforts coalesce into a resilient force capable of sustained operation across diverse contexts. By prioritizing strategic patience over immediate confrontation, these groups secure pathways for ideological persistence, ultimately redefining the boundaries of acceptable political engagement within democratic systems. Minority leverage in electoral and policy manipulation. Small minorities wield outsized sway by channeling their efforts into primary contests, characterized by participation rates ranging from 20 to 30%, which empowers tightly knit groups to select candidates sympathetic to their causes. During broader electoral battles, these minorities function as pivotal disruptors, siphoning off 2 to 5% of the electorate to alter results in tightly contested scenarios, compelling dominant parties to integrate aspects of their doctrines. This uneven distribution of influence arises from quantitative frameworks that highlight the disruptive potential of minority interventions in fragmenting established majority coalitions. On the policy front, minorities exert control through advocacy campaigns supported by independent expenditure committees and legal challenges, allocating limited assets to pivotal legislative proposals. Through the lens of economic viability or communal security, they secure bargains within alliances, comparable to the ways specialized lobbies mold regulations concerning natural resources or workforce protections. Empirical evaluations indicate that in electoral zones with a 20% minority composition, systems allowing vote accumulation facilitate delegate selection, thereby elevating their input in boundary adjustments. This leverage extends to the federal arena via the winner-take-all mechanism, where minorities positioned in decisive regions can sway executive contests with marginal vote swings of 1 to 3%. Past ideological transformations, exemplified by faith-driven constituencies, underscore how consistent application of group solidarity reconfigures party doctrines, elevating once marginal imperatives to core tenets via unrelenting advocacy. The comprehensive effect of these approaches lies in their ability to convert numerical disadvantages into strategic assets, fostering a political environment where minorities not only participate but actively dictate the trajectory of governance and ideological evolution. Fluid affiliations and multi-level electoral strategies. Fringe groups harness adaptable party loyalties to capitalize on factional rifts, alternating affiliations among leading parties in pursuit of advantageous policy alignments or population synergies. Locally, this entails orchestrated changes in voter enrollment to commandeer district oversight bodies, thereby directing choices for higher-tier representatives and amassing authority over territorial delineations. These operations leverage brief enrollment periods of 15 to 30 days, enabling penetration into restricted selection processes to elevate hardline nominees. On the regional scale, synchronized realignments aim at executive offices, placing compatible figures in positions to dictate voting protocols. This upward progression culminates in broader implications, with non-aligned statuses permitting interference in nomination phases for chief executives, mandating the assimilation of key demands. Illustrations from autonomous legislators aligning with dominant factions reveal how mixed identifications grant entry without absolute allegiance. Preserving this tactic demands physical relocation where beneficial and negotiations centered on specific concerns, guaranteeing prolonged advantage. Through synchronization with voting timetables and reliance on survey insights, entities perpetuate their sway from grassroots to apex arenas, converting fleeting victories into lasting institutional fortifications. The overarching efficacy of these methods resides in their promotion of ideological resilience, allowing fringe elements to traverse and influence the layered architecture of democratic elections with precision and foresight. Individual to block scaling in local political influence. The foundational role of individuals in shaping local political outcomes emerges prominently in city elections, where participation rates frequently dip below 30%, rendering even modest efforts highly consequential. A single citizen can initiate influence by registering to vote and extending reminders to personal networks, thereby amplifying turnout in races decided by narrow margins, such as those for city council or school board positions. Through targeted volunteering on campaigns, including door-to-door canvassing or phone banking, an individual establishes a presence that educates undecided voters on key issues like zoning or public safety, potentially swaying dozens of ballots in a precinct reliant on a few thousand participants. This personal engagement not only builds credibility but also creates ripple effects, as informed voters share insights within their circles, transforming isolated actions into broader momentum. As influence scales to small teams of 2 individuals, coordination enhances reach and efficiency, allowing for division of labor that covers more ground than solitary efforts. One member might focus on digital outreach via social media platforms or community apps, while the other handles in-person events like voter registration drives, collectively contacting 200 to 400 potential supporters. This synergy proves particularly effective in off-cycle elections, where turnout halves compared to national contests, enabling pairs to add 100 to 200 votes through personalized interactions that boost participation by 5 to 10% per contact. Such partnerships foster a sense of shared purpose, laying the groundwork for further expansion by recruiting additional allies drawn to the tangible results achieved in local governance. Groups expanding to 4 to 16 members introduce specialization, with roles dedicated to data analysis for identifying low-propensity voters, media production for crafting compelling narratives, and event organization for community gatherings. This structure mobilizes 500 to 1,000 contacts, positioning the team as a pivotal force in district-level decisions, where they can demand policy adjustments on matters like education funding or infrastructure development. In cities with populations around 50,000 and turnout at 15%, such groups command 5 to 10% of the effective vote, functioning as kingmakers who extract concessions from candidates eager for endorsements. The emphasis on training within these teams ensures knowledge transfer, sustaining impact beyond initial campaigns and embedding ideological preferences in ongoing political dialogues. At larger scales of 50 to 500 members, formalized organizations emerge, complete with chapters and strategic planning that extrapolate local successes to state and national arenas. These blocks leverage their numbers for endorsements and turnout drives, influencing not just city councils but also aggregating power to affect legislative redistricting or gubernatorial races. By prioritizing sustainability through successor training and resource allocation, such entities ensure that individual origins evolve into systemic dominance, where aggregated actions reshape governance structures. This progression underscores how starting from one citizen's initiative can culminate in ideological entrenchment, driving long-term changes in policy and representation across multiple levels of democracy. Out-of-the-box tactics in primary and general elections. Innovative approaches in combining primary and general election strategies begin with crossover voting in open primary systems, where participants strategically select ballots from opposing parties to nominate less competitive candidates, thereby easing paths to victory in the subsequent general phase. This tactic pairs with targeted persuasion efforts aimed at independents, who comprise about 40% of the electorate, using tailored messaging to highlight policy alignments. For individuals, unique methods like AI-generated personalized communications allow for customized appeals that resonate on a one-to-one basis, enhancing engagement without requiring large-scale resources. Small groups refine this through experimental testing of advertisement effectiveness, iterating on content to maximize impact in niche demographics. Local innovations such as flash mobs at polling sites inject energy into campaigns, boosting turnout by 10 to 20% through performative displays that convey unity and positive visions, drawing in apathetic voters. At the statewide level, wedge issue initiatives create ballot measures that divide opposing bases, forcing parties to take stances that alienate segments and open opportunities for fringe gains. Nationally, gamified applications engage younger demographics, increasing mobilization by 5 to 15% among 18 to 29-year-olds via interactive features that reward participation. These tactics capitalize on persuasion differentials, where effects reach 5 to 10 points in primaries due to lower turnout and more ideological voters, compared to 1 to 2 points in generals. Larger groups advance pro-democracy movements advocating for reforms like ranked choice voting, which alters winner-take-all dynamics to favor broader coalitions and reduce spoiler effects. Production values in amateur advertisements lend authenticity, making messages more relatable and amplifying reach through social sharing. Sustainability in these out-of-the-box efforts hinges on group cohesion, where collective adaptation to backlash, such as refining tactics in response to public criticism, preserves momentum. Broad movements grounded in optimistic narratives bargain for power by presenting alternatives that appeal across divides, ensuring enduring relevance in the two-party system. The integration of these unconventional methods exploits systemic quirks, from technological personalization to performative activism, fostering environments where fringe ideas gain footholds. By demanding cohesion and forward-looking visions, such strategies not only endure but evolve, countering resistance through persistent innovation. This framework highlights the potential for creative disruptions to reshape electoral landscapes, turning temporary advantages into lasting ideological shifts within democratic confines. Long-term, multi-generational political planning. Multi-generational political strategies center on the transmission of core values through familial socialization and structured education, cultivating dedicated supporter bases that span 30 to 60 years and adapt to evolving societal contexts. This approach begins with instilling ideological persistence in youth via home discussions and community programs, ensuring that beliefs endure across cohorts. Historical instances, such as socialist gradualism that permeated civil services and led to comprehensive welfare reforms, exemplify how sustained indoctrination through curricula and media embeds principles deeply, influencing policy directions long after initial proponents have passed. Party capture forms a critical pillar, exploiting periodic realignments, occurring every 30 to 60 years, to groom successors who gradually reshape platforms and priorities. This involves mentoring emerging leaders within networks, positioning them to inherit influence and drive incremental changes that accumulate over decades. Family dynasties further this by amassing resources through endowments and alliances, creating legacies that span centuries and sustain policy advocacy across economic and social domains, as observed in influential lineages that have guided party evolutions. Demographic engineering complements these efforts by advocating for migration and population policies that alter electorates favorably, ensuring ideological alignment grows organically over generations. Economic leverage, through perpetual funding of think tanks and campaigns, provides the financial backbone for ongoing initiatives, adapting to shifts in generational attitudes to maintain relevance. These interconnected methods guarantee that ideologies not only persist but thrive, countering external pressures through continuous refinement and transmission. In essence, such planning transforms transient movements into enduring forces, where adaptation to socio-economic changes secures dominance. By focusing on education, mentorship, and resource control, these strategies navigate the slow pace of generational turnover, positioning ideologies to weather challenges and emerge strengthened in democratic arenas. Power acquisition and influence in administrative roles. Administrative roles within governmental structures represent critical nodes of decision-making authority, where power acquisition begins with targeted short-term maneuvers designed to secure entry and establish presence. Networking emerges as a foundational tactic, wherein individuals cultivate relationships with key patrons through participation in political events, strategic endorsements, and modest contributions that signal alignment and reliability. This patronage system facilitates access to advisory or staff positions, particularly during periods of political transition, such as post-election reshuffles, where vacancies arise and loyalty is rewarded. Volunteering specialized expertise during crises further accelerates this process, positioning the actor as an indispensable resource. For instance, offering policy analysis or logistical support in emergencies demonstrates immediate value, often leading to formal appointments that confer influence over administrative operations. Once embedded, the focus shifts to influencing those already in authoritative positions, employing subtle mechanisms that foster reciprocity and indirect leverage. Supplying decision-makers with tailored insights or data creates a dynamic of mutual benefit, where the provided information addresses gaps in knowledge or supports their agendas, thereby building obligations that can be invoked for favorable outcomes. Public pressure serves as a complementary tool, mobilized through organized petitions or media campaigns that highlight issues without direct confrontation, nudging officials toward desired directions while preserving plausible deniability. This balanced approach ensures that influence operates through persuasion rather than coercion, maintaining operational efficacy within bureaucratic hierarchies. Strategies diverge based on alignment with the targeted individuals, requiring nuanced adaptations to either bolster supporters or redirect opponents. For those in alignment, amplification of endorsements through public platforms or resource sharing strengthens their standing, embedding the influencer's priorities into their decision-making framework. In contrast, oppositional scenarios demand constructive engagement, such as providing feedback framed as collaborative input or subtly supporting alternative figures to introduce competition, thereby prompting concessions without severing ties. These tactics underscore the importance of relational politics, where even adversarial interactions are managed to preserve potential future collaborations. Long-term consolidation integrates these elements into a framework of sustained leverage, emphasizing mentorship and relational maintenance for enduring impact. Grooming protégés through guidance and succession planning ensures continuity, as trained successors inherit and expand influence within administrative spheres. Simultaneously, preserving connections with political opposition via neutral settings, such as bipartisan forums or informal dialogues, fosters rapport that transcends immediate conflicts, viewing politics as an interconnected ecosystem. This relational perspective sustains leverage by adapting to evolving dynamics, transforming short-term acquisitions into generational administrative dominance. Normalizing fringe ideologies through evidence and emotion. Fringe ideologies achieve normalization by grounding their expansion in a combination of empirical evidence and emotional resonance, framing initial marginalization as a transient phase overcome through demonstrable validity. Logic serves as the cornerstone, with deductive arguments exposing flaws in prevailing views, while statistics provide quantifiable support, such as data illustrating policy successes in analogous contexts. Historical perspectives reinforce this by drawing parallels to past ideas that transition from obscurity to acceptance, positioning the fringe as part of an evolutionary continuum rather than an aberration. This evidence triad builds intellectual credibility, appealing to rational actors and gradually eroding resistance rooted in unfamiliarity or bias. Short-term efforts prioritize awareness through educational initiatives, disseminating materials like reports and visuals that distill complex ideas into accessible formats, fostering initial curiosity and debate. Long-term strategies embed these concepts institutionally, infiltrating academic and research bodies to generate ongoing scholarship that validates the ideology over time. Pilot programs demonstrate practical efficacy, yielding measurable outcomes that serve as proof points for broader adoption, transforming abstract notions into tangible benefits that attract pragmatic supporters. Coalitions play a pivotal role in fusing the ideology across political spectrums, identifying overlapping interests to create hybrid alliances that dilute partisan barriers. Emotional strategies complement this by evoking empathy through personal narratives that humanize the ideology's proponents, reframing perceived negatives as assets, such as portraying subjugation as a badge of resilience. Victimhood narratives harness this to rally sympathy, turning historical disadvantages into motivational forces that broaden appeal and encourage solidarity from diverse groups. Countering negative connotations requires deliberate techniques like perspective-taking exercises, where audiences engage with the ideology from alternative viewpoints, and kinder discourse that avoids provocation while emphasizing shared human values. These inclusive appeals facilitate cultural integration, gradually shifting societal norms toward acceptance. Through persistent application, subjugated views evolve into favorable positions, expanding influence by aligning with evolving social and political landscapes. Cycles of ideological power and maintenance. Ideological power cycles commence with minorities ascending through masterful deployment of emotional rhetoric and opportunistic exploitation of crises, which erode the foundations of entrenched majorities. By articulating grievances in visceral terms, such as appeals to fear or injustice, minorities galvanize support, displacing dominant paradigms via institutional capture, seizing control of education, media, and governance structures. This inversion, where the fringe becomes normative, often stems from adaptive maneuvering that capitalizes on socio-economic disruptions, rendering the former majority a diminished force through sustained cultural and policy shifts. Resurgence for displaced groups involves reclaiming positions by mobilizing core adherents with calls to historical legacies and adapting ideologies to contemporary demographics. Learning from prior minority tactics, such as coalition building and narrative reframing, enables a strategic counteroffensive that exposes opponents' manipulative methods, fostering distrust and rallying fragmented supporters. Socio-economic factors, like economic downturns, provide fertile ground for resurgence, allowing the ideology to reposition itself as a solution to prevailing discontent. Maintenance of regained power demands fortification through legal and media frameworks, enacting reforms that institutionalize advantages while tying economic benefits to ideological loyalty, creating dependencies that deter defection. Co-opting elements of rival agendas dilutes threats, incorporating moderate aspects to broaden appeal and prevent unified opposition. Defensive tactics, including wedge issues to divide challengers, ensure superiority by maintaining internal cohesion and external fragmentation, all while avoiding overreach that could provoke backlash. Sustaining this position requires perpetual vigilance, adapting to generational changes and monitoring shifts in public sentiment to refine strategies. By embedding in enduring institutions and fostering relational networks, ideologies preserve dominance, blocking competitors through a balanced mix of inclusion and strategic exclusion. This cyclical process highlights the fluid nature of power, where adaptability and foresight determine long-term viability in democratic arenas. Conclusion: he perpetual contest, resilience, adaptation, and the endurance of ideological dominance. The pathways traced in this analysis reveal the profound adaptability of democratic institutions to ideological contestation. Fringe perspectives, initially confined to narrow networks, systematically expand through decentralized coordination, electoral asymmetries, and multi-level maneuvering. From individual mobilization in municipal contests to fluid affiliations that reshape state and national outcomes, the mechanisms of influence demonstrate how focused minorities exploit structural vulnerabilities, low turnout, primary dominance, and coalition dynamics, to accumulate leverage far beyond their numerical strength. These processes are not aberrations but intrinsic features of pluralistic systems where concentrated effort routinely outweighs diffuse majorities, particularly in environments of voter apathy and institutional fragmentation. This expansion is neither random nor inevitable, but the product of deliberate strategies that blend short-term opportunism with long-term persistence. Emotional framing and narrative reframing overcome historical subjugation, while evidence-based arguments and institutional embedding secure acceptance across generations. The cyclical nature of power, where minorities rise to displace majorities, only to face their own potential displacement, underscores the necessity of continuous adaptation. Those who master the interplay of local dominance, administrative infiltration, and multi-generational transmission are best positioned to sustain influence amid shifting socio-economic and cultural currents. The interplay between emotional resonance and rational justification ensures that even once marginalized ideas can achieve legitimacy, provided they align sufficiently with prevailing grievances or emerging crises. Ultimately, the endurance of any ideological position in a pluralistic democracy depends upon its capacity to balance consolidation with flexibility. Rigid exclusionary defenses invite resurgence from below. Inclusive yet strategic coalition building, combined with control over education, media, and economic incentives, offers the most durable path to dominance. Power is never fully secured but perpetually contested and renewed through the same disciplined, multi-layered strategies that enabled its initial acquisition. The maintenance of superiority requires vigilance against internal decay, proactive adaptation to demographic and technological changes, and the cultivation of loyalty through tangible benefits and shared identity. In this framework, political success resides not in the elimination of opposition but in the perpetual management of its terms, ensuring that today's ascendant ideology remains tomorrow's dominant force through foresight, resilience, and unrelenting strategic discipline.